I think we will. So let's start tonight by just first kind of doing a real quick recap. Like really quick, well, like what kind of resonated with you last week, and you all can drop some things in the chat as well. Like, what are some things that kind of stuck out to you, resonated with you last week that that kind of, that either made a difference for you or gave you something to think about as the week was going
on? For me, it was just knowing that you're on a journey and that God is directing your every path. And even if you take a different route, He is going to redirect you to where you need to go. But you just got to make sure that you take the exit. So that's what stuck out to me from last week. With every trial that you go through, there is a reason for everything. For everything.
Cool. I think what stuck out to me probably the most just about that particular segment of our story is just a reminder that that the Lord provides through His people. And a lot of times we want to keep our story secret, and we don't want we want people to know about all the good stuff that's happening in our lives, but we don't want people to know about the challenges and the difficulties, because society makes us feel like everybody else is good, like ain't nobody else going through anything. Mm-hmm. And so we feel crazy when we're going through difficulty, we're experiencing difficulty, and we have our own standards and expectations for where we ought to be and what our lives ought to look like and all that kind of stuff. And it just made me continue to wonder, just how different life would be if we didn't have the ability or have the level of comfort to be able to share our difficulty with other people, and then the Lord used those opportunities for them to be a blessing. I mean, even today, we got some really exciting news that you guys at church will find out about in a couple of weeks or whatever. But we got that news because we needed something, and we were able to share that with somebody that was in a position to be able to do something about it. And the Lord blessed us tremendously. When I say like tremendously, I mean like tremendously blessed us today, but He didn't do it miraculously. I mean, it's a miracle, yes, but he did it he provided through one of His children. He moved on their heart, and He through the Spirit prompted them to engage in some behind the scenes work to be able to open some doors for us. And and it just makes me wonder, like, how much further could we be in life if we stop being afraid and we listen to the Spirit when it came to when it came time to opening our mouths and asking for help. Acknowledging that there's a need that exists, and that while we could try to like find our own way to do it, like somebody else already knows. And so I'm gonna stop there, because that's a whole different thing. And my time to preach is on Sundays. So
you about to go in?
No, I ain't finna go in.
Put some hoops in there.
So I think that's what really resonates with me. And and I pray that even as we continue the conversation tonight, that you all continue to be blessed. So just kind of as a recap, to pick up where we left off last week we were let me flip this. We were at this place, which was the Bob Carey pedestrian bridge. And I told y'all about how unimpressive it was. And, after making my first journey to Omaha, Nebraska. Thank you, Rachel, for sharing that. I'm glad that it's been a blessing to you. And yes, that's right, Ashe. I ain't fitting to. So, Bob Carey pedestrian bridge, totally unimpressed. And the Lord just rocks my entire world in that moment, and takes all of my excuses for why I'm not qualified and why I'm not good enough to be able to start a church, and throws them out the window. And end up making the decision to leave to plant the church, to plant the church before I leave Omaha, my first trip to Omaha, and get back home. And we talked about sharing it with Jene, and and again, if you're joining us tonight and you missed all that conversation last week, you can find that on our Facebook page, facebook.com/church on purpose. You can find that broadcast from last week. You can also find it on our church website, churchonpurpose.org. Just go to the on demand section, and you can go back through there, and you can find all of our entire archive for the last 6 months. And you'll find the video from last week where we kind of walk through all of this portion in detail. If you want more insight, and also on YouTube as well. You can do the same thing on YouTube. But get back, share it with Jene. Jene is like, all right, let's do it. Spend a week fleshing out the vision of Church on Purpose with my good friend and brother Anthony. And by the end of that first week, we accept the fact that the Lord is calling us to Omaha, Nebraska. And that's kind of where we ended last week. We were just kind of talking about embracing what that was going to mean for us and for our family. And I think I can kind of pause there, give you opportunity to kind of share whatever is on your mind at that point.
Other than when we actually realized that, we were called to go to Omaha, Nebraska, it was really just understanding that God was going to provide. Was it tough right now? Yes, it was very tough. But I knew that he had called us to go there, and I knew that he was going to make sure that his children were taken care of. And even though I knew that, I still had to put action to that. And so in the meantime, as we are prepping and planning and things like that, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, okay, income wise, how are we going to be able to sustain ourselves and things like that. So that gave me an opportunity to just sit down and think about, what did I want to do? Did I want to go back outside of the home and work? Because at the time I was working for myself. And so, just a lot of things that were going across my brain during that time, and, kind of sat down and talked to Jonathan on the next steps. And he started talking about, well, let's talk to our family and friends about that. And I kind of passed that over to you.
Yeah. So we, kind of the next question that came up after saying like, all right, the Lord is calling us to Omaha. After you get past all the why questions, the next question is, well, when? And that was a much tougher question to answer, because, the idea was fresh and the vision was clear, but the pathway to realizing the vision was anything but clear. At this point, it was pretty much just an idea. And, thankfully it had been confirmed by, by Jene being open and receptive to the vision. My father confirmed it. I definitely, when he didn't seem surprised that the Lord was calling us to do that, that was really huge, because that was a whole different level of just confidence and assurance in the Lord's call. And then, even when we shared it with our pastor, sat down and had a conversation with him, and, and I talk often about just how interesting that whole situation can be when you have a member of your church, a family that's very involved in your church, a minister at your church, who then, pops up one day and is like, hey, I'm finna go, start a church. I've seen plenty of stories, heard plenty of others, where that ends up causing a lot of problems, because, the pastor starts feeling a certain kind of way, and it can lead to all different kind of, pride and ego issues there. You start wondering why people got to leave and why they feel like they need to do their own thing and what they feel like is going to be better than, and all that kind of comparison type stuff. But God really blessed us with the church that we were a part of, in Norfolk, Gethsemane Community Fellowship Baptist Church. And our pastor there, Dr. Kirk Houston, First Lady Sharon Houston, just really blessed us abundantly, because sitting down and having that conversation with him, even before I told him that the Lord was, even before we got to that point in the conversation where all those conversations got to, which was, well, where do you think you're going to plant? Before we ever got to that point in the conversation, he was very, very affirming of the call. And, there didn't appear to be any kind of doubt in his mind that, that what I was hearing was the Lord. And that was also very reassuring, because, he was the founder of that church, planted that church in 1992. And so, having that experience as a church planter, I believe my mother-in-law is giving a woohoo on the shout out of our church back in Norfolk. But having that experience as a church planter and having, at that point, I think the church was, I don't know, maybe 20, let me see, this was 2014. So 22 years old.
Yeah.
So the church was 22 years old at that time. So, that's a lot of experience from starting a ministry, watching it grow and develop through the early stages, and then kind of hitting that explosive growth stage and things of that nature. And so I knew that there was going to be a lot that we would be able to learn from him and from the leadership at Gethsemane, as we were preparing to leave, specifically about planting a church, because of course we've been learning in ministry for years, but this was an opportunity to be able to learn specifically about planting a ministry, starting a new ministry. And so it was really important to me that, that we had his support in that process. And just the overwhelming support just went so far to help put my heart at ease, because definitely with the time that we had there left, we didn't want to create any kind of confusion and any kind of friction. And truthfully, when we started talking about planning a church, there was never a moment where we thought for a second that we were going to be anywhere in the same city or anywhere in the same general area as our home church. That was never a consideration, that we were going to leave and go 2 blocks over and start something, like, that doesn't make sense in my head. So we knew that we were going to be transitioning somewhere. We knew that it was going to require a move. And so to be, to know that we were preparing to venture out kind of on our own, but to know that, that our church supported us in that endeavor was huge. And so, we were able to have a couple of conversations, just kind of talk about the process and whatnot. But to Jene's point, we got to that, that point where we started real. All right, we've kind of been keeping this under wraps and only been sharing it with a handful of people. Like, it's time to start sharing the vision with other people. Because again, when you never know, like, what's going to happen when you open your mouth, and when people find out about what it is that you're doing. Now, you got to be careful. We didn't share it with everybody. Initially. We called together a group of our friends, invited them over to the house one evening. They probably thought it was for a private business reception, because we had been doing some network marketing for a while there, but they came on over to the house, and it was a couple
online too.
Yeah, because Anthony was still here in Omaha, and Edgar, who we talked about last week, does the graphic work for Church on Purpose. He was also a part of it online. My parents and my sisters were able to join online as well, and so it was a really great night, a momentous night for us, as I shared the vision of Church on Purpose for the first time with other people. And so much of that original presentation is the framework and the bones for our vision dinner presentation that we've been using for the for the life of the church. A lot of those components are now going to be absorbed into this new members training, that new members kind of orientation type piece that we're going to be walking through on Wednesdays starting in March. Describe what a disciple is at Church on Purpose. And then once we finish that particular segment, then we're going to start talking about describing what a member at Church on Purpose looks like. And then we're going to wrap up that series by describing what a leader at Church on Purpose looks like and make those targets very, very clear. But a lot of those elements from that original presentation are going to still be in, especially the member presentation, where we really start talking about kind of what Church on Purpose looks like. And so, we had a great conversation with everybody that night, sharing the vision. And I mean, anytime you have a vision, anytime you have a dream, you see it so clearly that sometimes it can be confusing when other people don't. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so clear that you're just like, how can anybody hear this and not
jump at
not get it,
yeah.
And it not make sense, like, mm-hmm. And it's not be the bee's knees, as the young folks say. Not really, but but just kind of, be prepared for that on your journey as you're sharing your vision with people. You're going to be excited about it. You're going to be enthusiastic about it because you see it. But one of the challenges of being a visionary is that you see it. Mm-hmm. Nobody else sees what you see. And the only way that they can begin to see bits and pieces of what you see is by hearing you share what you see. But even then, they're only going to be working with limited understanding and limited insight into the vision that God has given you. And I think, one of the things that I have been learning through this process as the pastor of Church on Purpose is understanding how necessary it is not for people to necessarily fully understand my vision and to embrace my vision per se, but for them to be able to, one, understand their vision, mm-hmm. and then two, to be able to connect their vision to the vision of the church, mm-hmm. So that by them doing what it is God has placed on their hearts to do, it advances the mission of the church. That's that's where we're trying to get to, is not where, everybody just becomes a program robot that is, that sees the vision exactly the way that I do, because that's never going to happen. But what can happen is people can be very clear about their vision, and they can find a way that their vision connects with and supports the vision of Church on Purpose. Because by connecting your individual vision to a larger corporate vision, then it not only provides additional protection and provision for the fulfillment of your vision, but then your vision is able to also create space for the fulfillment of other people's visions. And so, so I don't even know why I started talking about that, but hey, get that one for free. So, so share with everybody kind of your thoughts about that night that we shared the vision.
I thought it was intimate. It was with those that we built either relationships with, or they were our family. And I felt like that night, we also shared in communion on that night. So it made it even more special, because it was a private, small setting, and it was personable. And for us to have that time to share the vision of the church and share where we're looking to go with the people that we love and care about. It felt like we were bridging the not really bridging. Stop. Play too much. Get your pastor. But I felt like we were connecting even deeper, with sharing that with everyone on that night. I saw a couple of people cry. um, knowing that they were possibly emotional about where we were getting ready to go, like leaving, because I don't even think we told them that night that we were leaving. Did we tell them that night that we were
Yeah,
leaving?
that was at the end of the presentation.
Okay, so
Everybody was real excited until we got to that
yeah.
point of
So
the
yeah,
presentation.
that's where the tears came in. For a lot of people, and a lot of like, oh wow, type thing. I can't see.
Oh yeah, that's right. You can't see.
But yeah, that night was very special for us. We had our children there. So Maya, even though Jada did look like Maya, Jada and David, we had them there as well. We were able to, a couple of months ago, I think it was, to look back on some footage from that night. And I was just like, wow, we all fit in our living room, and look how small David was.
Listen to your mama. Oh, that's right. You can't see. It says, "Don't beat up the pastor."
Come get your son-in-law.
Quentin thought that was funny.
Thank you, Q. But yeah,
Miss Laverne is praying for you.
Thank you, Miss Laverne. Pray for me.
And Courtney said I'm childish.
He is, and you already know it. But anywho, yeah, that's how I felt on that night. It was a lot of emotions going on that night. I was kind of scared at first, with, of course, that pride that Jonathan talked about, with us going through so much in Virginia, dealing with, jobs and, just feeling secure in ourselves. And then, having to share with people like, this is what God told us to do. And them, me thinking that they're in the back of their head, like, how are they going to do that? They can't even do blah, 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 and some of them didn't even know the whole story, but I knew those that were close to me knew everything. So, just a little bit of mixed emotions during that time. But I think after we, laid it all out there and told everybody what was going on, I felt better.
You're absolutely right, though. And I think that on the journey to purpose, I think that is a point that everybody experiences, where you're like, all right, Lord, you're asking me to do what? And I can't even you're asking me to do XYZ, and I can't even do ABC right now. Last week, of course, we talked more in depth just about kind of the financial difficulty that we were already experiencing while we were living in Virginia. And so, but the benefit of living in Virginia was that we still had family and friends close by. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, all right, yeah, we're struggling. And I mean, like, struggling, but even in the struggle, we know that in the event the rug gets pulled out from under us, we have places that we can go. And now it's like, the Lord is like, nah, fam, like, you leave here and everybody that move halfway across the country where you don't have a safety net no more. Like, we get kicked out of, we lose our house or whatever out here. Moving out here, we ain't know nobody besides Anthony. And, he was in a 2-bedroom apartment, which would have been a whole lot for our family of 4 at the time. But I mean, he's such a great dude. He would have, allowed us to stay. But, they say 2 things that, I think Benjamin Franklin said, fish and house guests stink after 3 days. And so that would have been an awkward and uncomfortable situation. But, cheeks,
you're so childish.
But I mean, that's a totally different dynamic. And that was a major point of difficulty with even embracing the reality and the possibility that the Lord could even be calling us to do this. It's like, you want us to pick up everything and to move halfway across the country, and we are struggling right now. Like, how are we going to pay for moving expenses Like the time when we moved into the house that we were living in, like, my sister Amber came down and she helped us to move our stuff from the little white house that we lived in Chesapeake, to the house that we were living in Norfolk. And I mean, we had to move all that stuff ourselves. And so, and we did that in the vehicles that we had. And so now you're talking about, like, you can't do that when you're moving halfway across the country.
No.
You got to be able to take, all of your stuff. And so, so immediately it's just like, how are we going to cover these moving expenses? Like, and of course, Jene and I are having the conversations like, well, where are we going to stay? Like, where are we going to live and all this kind of stuff. And so, we start moving into the winter, and because when we ended up meeting with everybody else, I think that was late September or late October.
I want to
say that was late September.
Yeah, because I had on orange and it was a sweater.
Okay.
That's how I tell the season.
Okay.
What I have on. And I remember the video.
Okay.
Don't judge me.
I'm no judgment. No judgment. This camera keeps going out of focus though, so I think everybody else feeling the way you feeling right now without your glasses on. So, but we were going into the winter months, and so of course we knew that we weren't going to be like transitioning in the winter. We knew that it was going to take time. One of the barriers that that was established for being able to start the church was, of course, you start the church, you're going to be a pastor. Mm-hmm. To be a pastor, you got to be ordained. And so at the time I wasn't ordained. I was just licensed at our church. And so had to begin the process and preparation for ordination at the church. Because, you can't leave and start a church until you're ordained. And so the ordination really ended up kind of helping to set the time frame for when we were going to be able to transition. And so we knew that it was going to kind of take about a year to go through the training, to go through the preparation, to prepare for the catechism, to complete the catechism, and then for the ordination service to take place, and the ordination to be completed. And so that kind of began to give us a time frame. So we had started talking about transitioning in like September, October of 2015. Really, like, I think it was like, I think we were talking like October, November, of 2015. And, but in that process, like Jene was talking about, we start kind of having these conversations about like, how are we going to, like, what is life going to look like? Because we have David and Jada at this point, they're being homeschooled. I think David is 4, Jada's 2, getting ready to turn 2. And actually, no, at this point, Jada's 1.
Yeah, she's 1.5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, David's 3, getting ready. No.
Yeah.
David's 4.
Yeah, David's 4.
Yeah. But they are, they're very small. They're not school age yet. We definitely know that we're not going to have enough money for childcare. And so, so we're trying to figure that all out. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Jene during this stage was she said, you've been at work for some time, and I've been home with the kids. And I know, like, with getting ready to move and, we're trying to get the church up and running and everything, I know that that's going to take time, and that's going to take attention, and that's going to take effort. And so she was like, so I will go back to work, and you can stay home, take over homeschooling duties with the kids, but then have that time during the day to be able to plan and prepare for getting the church off the ground. And that was huge, because that really did afford me a lot of planning opportunity and planning time to be able to really think through concepts and think through what things are going to look like, and to be able to identify opportunities to get involved and get connected in the community, and to be able to research and read more and learn more about Omaha as we were preparing to make that transition. And so she starts looking and starts applying for jobs and things like that. And I think so we already needed to come back out to Omaha to just kind of so that she could see it, because of course at this time she's planning to move to a place that she's never seen. I've only been there once, but she's never been there at all. And so, it was important to me that she had the opportunity to be able to see where we're moving. And so we had kind of forecasted this trip for the spring where we would take a trip back out to Omaha so that she would have the opportunity to be able to see the city, get introduced kind of to the area, see that there is more in Nebraska than cows, corn, and
yes, keep going. Praise the Lord.
And so, so it worked out. I think that you ended up having a job interview scheduled for the time that we were going to come out here. Mm-hmm. And so
before we came out here.
Yeah, but you were going to interview when you got here.
Yeah.
And so, so that worked out. So the trip ended up being a trip where she not only was going to be able to get introduced to the area, but also be able to interview for a position, and gave us the opportunity to scout out some apartments, because we knew moving to the new city, moving to a new place, that we didn't want to try to set down roots as soon as we got out here. But we needed time to get out here to be able to kind of look around, learn where we wanted to be, and kind of figure that out before we ended up planting ourselves in a particular part of the city. Not that we even had the money to be able to buy a house at that time. I mean, just the way that the Lord worked out our living arrangements was
beautiful.
I mean, divine in and of itself.
Yes.
But we'll get there in a second. And so April, we had this trip set for April of 2015. Before that, maybe like, I don't know, I want to say maybe like a month and a half, maybe 2 months before that, we were, of course, still at church, and, still kind of, still active, still engaged, and, things still going well at church. We were at church one day after church. I don't even remember what was going on that particular day.
We're in the youth chapel.
Yeah, we were there, but we were there and, talking, I mean, doing what Black people do after church anyway, just, having conversations, talking about stuff, before you find out where you're going to go eat and all that kind of stuff. And what, you want to tell the story?
No, you tell the story.
Okay. So we're there, and two of our friends who were at the kind of vision sharing session at the house in late September, they, we were already having conversation or whatever, and so Quentin and Priscilla, who of course we had been working together off and on in youth ministry in different capacities over the years, who had the opportunity to be there at the initial vision sharing session and everything, they told us after church that, they kind of brought up the whole church planting thing. And it wasn't like one of those things that we walked around talking about all the time, but it was something that other people talked about all the time. But came up in conversation, and they said that, that they had been thinking about, the vision sharing session that we had at the house, and have been praying about it, and that they wanted to go with us to help get things started with the church. And so up until that point, there is a, even with Jene saying, cool, like, let's go. And even with my dad saying, like, I get it, like, this makes sense for you to do, listen to the Lord. And even with our pastor saying, like, I'm not surprised, like, you have the you've demonstrated the service and the leadership to be able to do, this kind of thing. And, um, um, even with all of that affirmation, there's always like this part of you that feels like you're crazy. And, because really in that sense, most of those people like are obligated in some way, shape or form to support. Jene, I'm sure there was a measure of kind of obligation that she felt to support the vision in those moments where she didn't understand it, because she was my wife. And, and so, so even with her embracing of the vision, it's like, okay, there's still a part that's kind of like, okay, what am I crazy? But but for somebody else that has like no obligations and no responsibility and no responsibility for us, or to us, to be able to identify their own connection to the vision and to want to come along in support of that vision, and to come so far in support of that vision, again, to a place that they had never seen before, was huge. And it was affirming for me, because it's like, okay, well, maybe you're not hearing the Lord wrong, because if he's speaking to other people and connecting them to what's going on, then maybe what you heard the Lord say, you really did hear the Lord say.
Now get to the fun part. The funny part. It's not
the funny
fun
part.
It's not the fun part, but it's the funny part. Go ahead.
So there was an open door to the youth chapel, and so when they said that they wanted to go with us, I took advantage of the open door and I took a lap around the building. And because it's, again, it's exciting when somebody not only sees something that is so major for you, but is willing to support. And and even especially during that time, like really still struggling with to be honest, like with lack of support in a lot of different areas. Like there's encouragement, but there is a lot of difficulty in multiple arenas, where people just can't see it. And especially when you're trying to do something for the Lord and you believe the Lord is calling you to do it, like it's part of our human nature to want to find validation in what other people think about what the Lord is calling us to do. But I really believe that as much as I wrestled with that, like the Lord had to do it that way. I don't think, like, even in hindsight now, 6 years later, I don't think that like people just didn't want to see it, or like, chose to not see it. I really believe that the Lord didn't allow people to see it, because I needed to believe what he told me, regardless of what other people said, or regardless of what other people thought, or regardless of what other people believe. Because along this journey, there have been plenty of other times where we've had to make decisions and people couldn't see it, but the decision still had to be made because that's what the Lord said. Yeah. And I feel like early on, the Lord was like, nah, fam, like I can't set you up to where you think that every time I ask you to do something, everybody else is going to be like, oh yeah, go do that. Like, that's a great idea, because that's not life. There are plenty of times where the Lord asks us and calls us and expects us to do things, and everybody else is like, are you stupid? Yeah. And it's not necessarily, and I think I've grown in this area, but it's not necessarily because of any flaw in them, or or anything that's wrong with them, or what could easily and honestly was at that time just kind of interpreted as a lack of faith or a lack of belief in my ability and capacity to be able to succeed in doing this. It wasn't about all that. I really believe like the Lord was just like, no, you can't you can't provide support right now because he needs to be focused on my words, not anybody else's. And so, and so even for Quentin and Priscilla, I mean, this was like April. And so you're talking about September to October, November, December, January, February, March, April. That's 7 months that we went by before even they came along with the commitment to go and partner. Where and seven winter months, that's fall and winter months. That we're going through, where we're stuck in the house and I mean, it's gloomy outside and all that kind of stuff. And so, on your journey to embracing the vision that God gives you, like there are going to be times like that where the only thing you have to hold on to is what the Lord has told you. And if that's not enough for you, then your faith hasn't grown to the point to where it's going to need to be for the rest of the journey. And you'll kind of see what I mean by that in a minute. So yeah, so they commit to plant with us, to come out and help us with getting the church started and everything. And I take off and I take a lap around the church, just
look like Carlton,
excited and enthusiastic about the fact that somebody else sees it and knowing just the gifting that both Quentin and Priscilla have, knowing that it'll be an add to ministry. It was a great day and definitely a hallmark moment on that journey. And it worked out because, we had this conversation in April. Again, like I said, like in May, we're already making the trip. Was that our anniversary weekend?
It was.
Yeah. So, so we end up making the drive back to Omaha, in the truck. So in the Navigator. And you all may remember 2 years ago, I preached a message about the Navigator, for New Rising Stars anniversary. Just about how jacked up and beat up the Navigator is now and how I can't even drive it on the interstate because the transmission is jacked up and the doors don't lock and, parts of the frame are rusted and broken underneath it. And the it's holding on. And cosmetically, it looks great, but
hold on,
she's struggling. And I believe, a big part of that is because within that year, we ended up, within like 18 months, I think we made that drive from Virginia to Omaha and back, which is 19 to 20 hours one way. It's 1,100 miles one way. And so we made that drive not 3 times, it was like 5 times in 18 months.
Yeah.
And so after that last time, the truck was like, nope, never again. Not gonna do it. And she'd been sitting here in Nebraska ever since. But we rode that truck though, and the Lord was gracious to us over all of those highway miles because we never had any problems. And this was 2015. So at the time, that truck was 16 years old. And it did everything that we needed it to do. So we came out in May, and Quentin and Priscilla came with us, and this one. And so this was a part of the tour that we took when we went down to that, of course, is down by the Bob Carey pedestrian bridge. So I took them to see the little spray painted line on the concrete, so they could see where the vision and everything came to pass. And, we just kind of spent time going around the city, looking at different things about the city, sharing with them kind of some of the experiences that I had. Of course, we went to Big Mama's. They had an opportunity to be able to meet Big Mama and
the family.
Yeah. And and that was really kind of the opportunity for them to be able to see what I saw, just in terms of the fact that there's more to Nebraska than cows, corn, and so and I think that made the vision even more realistic for them, because it's like, oh, okay, like we're not going to some little podunk town, but Omaha is actually a city. It might not be the biggest city ever, but
it's a city.
It's a city, and it's really, in kind of like layout, it's really similar in a lot of ways to Hampton Roads, because Hampton Roads doesn't really have like a major city center like Richmond or like DC and major cities like that. Like, it's a whole bunch of people in Hampton Roads, but Hampton Roads itself is really kind of like a big suburb. And so, like, coming out here, there was just a lot of similarities in kind of like the lay of the land, like everything kind of being spread out and whatnot, and there not really being like a major downtown area. But so there was a lot of familiarity in that aspect, but it was also different because there are so many different kinds of community here. But it took what they were reading about, what they were researching on their own, and what I had shared. It took that and put it with like a tangible experience. And you share just like how that trip impacted you and your preparation for the move.
So for me, I was scared but excited about taking that trip. First of all, that trip is so long. Oh my God.
And we made it in one day. No, 19 and a half hours.
And
straight.
His motto is,
we don't stop to pee till the hand is on E.
And me and Priscilla were in the back holding on tight. Was like, all right, are we gonna drink the rest of this right here, or are we gonna just hold it on? So anyway, and that was my first ever time actually driving on like long distance. My god sister would tell you, my mother and my sister would tell you, I will sit in the passenger seat and you will drive, but Jene will not drive, not long distance. I will sit on the passenger seat and go to sleep. But anyway, so being able,
we live 2 minutes from the church right now, and Jene still falls asleep on the way to church.
Anyway, I said, girl, you can do this. So Priscilla and I took turns driving, and it gave us an opportunity to bond. And in ministry, we worked together, but outside of ministry, we really didn't have a relationship. And so that particular trip helped us to bond like we needed to start building the sisterhood that we were going to need during this time of planning a church and moving forward in ministry. And so we spent a long time, guys were, playing peekaboo in the back, acting like they were asleep. But they knew they were not asleep. They were watching everything that we did. Anyway, gave us time to talk during that time. And then we got there. You're laughing. I can't read the comments.
Your mother said, remind me not to take a long distance trip with Jonathan Chapman.
You say this every time. Anyway, so when we got here, it was very refreshing, just to see the downtown, not downtown, but the midtown.
No, you mean to see buildings.
Oh yeah, to see buildings, instead of cornfields and just flat land. Like, where are the people? But anyway, once we got into Omaha and got to see that, I felt a little bit better. And then being able to take a tour of Omaha, especially North Omaha, and being able to sit down with Big Mama. And just talk to her. Like, when I first met her, she instantly gave me a hug, was like, come on, sit down and get something to eat. We're going to feed you, type thing. And then being able to meet the family as well, and meet some of the staff members, too. It was a beautiful thing. I got to meet Gladys. and her sassiness on that day. Got to meet Delina and her spirit of wanting to tell us about the history of Omaha, and what we needed to do in order to not so much survive, but giving us tools that we would need to use in order to make sure that we did what we were supposed to do with the resources that we had, if that makes sense. Yeah. So being able to sit down and have those conversations, I think it was like we were there for a very long time. And so being able to have that time here before actually moving was what I needed. It reassured me that this was the place that we needed to be. It gave me a heart for Omaha, and for the people of Omaha, and I could actually see my family living here and raising our children here. So I was very excited after leaving. I was pumped up, you know, and ready to go home and tell, my mom and my sister about, the trip and everything, because they wanted to know, while we were there. Well, actually, my mom wanted to know while we were there. She wanted to know everything. I was like, no, I'm just going to tell you when I get back. We have a lot to talk about. But being able to have that journey, being able to sit down and plan within that journey with Quentin and Priscilla and Anthony to ask those different questions. We watched movie after movie, but the movies went with the places where we were getting ready to go. So for instance, we watched Boys Town. What's the guy? Father Flanagan movie. There, if you haven't watched it, it's beautiful. And talked about his story and what he did here. And then we went to go visit where Boys Town was. The Malcolm X, we watched a story about Malcolm X, and then we went to go visit, where Malcolm X's home to be. So it was very impactful, the journey, and very intentional. I would say we did everything with a purpose for that journey. So yeah, I appreciated it.
Yeah, and again, the Lord just he just blessed us through the whole thing. I mean, even again, blessed us going back, because we made the return trip in one day. And I think we left at like 1 o'clock in the morning and drove all the way through, and we made it all the way back to our last hour of the trip before we started having any problems with the truck. Ended up having like some funky smells and stuff going on, smelling like stuff burning and like fluid and all that kind of stuff. So, but we were able to push it in that last little bit of the trip and get back to my parents' house in Richmond. And, and then Quentin took a look at the truck, and we never did end up finding out what the problem was. But we ended up making it back. And like I said, we made plenty of other trips after that. That the truck was able to rock and roll for. So we got back, and I think everybody had a different level of understanding of what it was we were moving to. I think Jene found assurance in the fact that she wasn't going to have to use an outhouse, but that she would actually have indoor plumbing. But
somebody say amen.
But again, to tell you like how the Lord was just kind of working through this whole process. Of course, we're looking to move and trying to figure out like what all of that is going to look like. And, we've already talked, extensively just about the financial difficulty that we were already in before leaving. And just because of, like the other stuff, the financial difficulty that we have been experiencing for years prior to that. And the, so of course our credit had taken a hit and all that kind of stuff. And so we're out here looking for apartments, and everybody want to do a credit check and all this other kind of stuff. And we just looking at each other like, well, guess we won't be living here. But again, man, like the Lord knows. Mm-hmm. And even with all of those other places that we didn't qualify for, it was because like that's not where we were supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Though we ended up connecting with this guy named Rick Holland.
Beautiful spirit.
Rick is just a really great guy. He's just one of those guys that just I don't know, it's like weird. He's not weird, but you meet him and you're just like, oh man, like he's a really cool guy, you know? And so he ended up showing us around this house, and it was funny because it was the last spot that we looked at that was on the list to like look at, because here to tell you how long ago this was and how time flies. Jene found this house on Craigslist. You know, people don't even use Craigslist for anything anymore besides trying to find somebody to murder. But you know, it was the last spot that we were looking for, and like at the end of the tour or whatever, he gave us the application, and he was like, you know, there's no credit check or anything. We was like, oh, guess we're moving here. Because we just knew like that was gonna be it. And you know, amazingly, the house that we end up moving into is
down the street,
literally a 4-minute walk from where Anthony lives. So again, Anthony had moved out here a year before us. When we made the trip out here, we stayed with him, and so we were already familiar with kind of where his house was, what was in that area. And so we were actually able to move. He stayed on 38th Ave. We ended up moving on 38th Street, on the opposite side of Dodge, but within walking distance. And that ended up being even more of a blessing to us than we thought ahead of time, because like, you know, times where we needed to go out or we needed to go do something or take care of something, or where we just need to get out of the house, like he would literally just walk down the street over to the house and then come and hang out with the kids. And so it was a tremendous blessing. Like I cannot put into words how much of a blessing Anthony Stark Jr. was to our lives transitioning to Omaha. I mean, there's no way in the world we have as great of an experience and learn to love the city the way that we do now without Anthony. It just does not happen. And you know what I'm grateful for is that, you know, now the Lord has given us the opportunity to be able to be Anthony for other people. And you'll hopefully hear about those stories at other times, but it was, I mean, like finding that place, that location, that house, and you know, the rent being within like what we could do. Because I mean, when Jene's first job, when we moved out here, didn't pay a lot at all,
and I had to travel,
and she had to drive back and forth to Lincoln every day in a 99 Lincoln Navigator, and so like half of her check was going to gas. Because I mean, it was like $65-$70 just to fill that thing up, and she had to fill up like twice a week, and so it was rough. But we'll get to that in a bit. So, you know, so we're making final preparations for the move. We had worked out with the church where, well, actually, Jene, of course, as we mentioned, Jene came out here and she interviewed for the position. She ended up getting the job, but they needed her to start before we had planned on moving. And so we actually, like I said, we hadn't planned on moving till like October or November. And they were like, nah, like we need you here in August. And we were like, well, darn, like that drastically accelerates this process. Because 2 months is, I mean, that's significant.
That's significant.
Yes, and it was already May. So you're talking about May to June, July, August, like 3 months. We got to wrap this thing up and get ready to move. And so, so that really kind of accelerated everything. The church ended up doing a, you know, one of the things that I talked to our pastor about when we had talked about relocating and all that kind of stuff. He was like, you know, well, what can the church do? I was like, you know, well, we would love to have a commissioning service, and we would love for the church to commission us for this work as a demonstration to everybody that the church is supportive of the work. And that the church recognizes the work that we're going to do. And, you know, and he was, of course, on board with the idea. And so we were able to have the commissioning service, and it was beautiful. It was a great day. Family and friends from in town, out of town came and shared with us and shared their thoughts. And I'll never forget our goddaughter, Serenity, was there, and she she got up to share some words, and we sitting there on the front row, and she's up there talking, and she got through like 3 words before she started crying.
I'm about to cry right now because I'm thinking about it.
Had my suit on, but hopped up and jumped up on the stage, and and stood there with her as she shared those words. But it was amazing just for her to be there, and just wondering, like, okay, she grows up now with a direct connection to people that gave up their life and moved halfway across the country because the Lord said so. And so how, and that like that moment really for me started resonating. Just like, what are going to be all of the impacts of this decision that we don't ever even know about? How is even not even having started the church, but just making the decision to do so, like, how is this impacting other people's faith?
Yeah.
How is this transforming other people's outlook on what's possible and what God can do through their lives? And so that was a really powerful moment for me, from that service. I don't know what stuck out to you from that, and what you're going to do differently this week based on what you learned. But
we doing reflecting groups?
I don't know.
For me, it was, I think I said this in the last one, it was confirmation, because I had been all the way leading up to, this point, was struggling with my family not supporting me. And them struggling with the fact, not really supporting me, but struggling with the fact of me leaving them with all of the other stuff that has already happened. And for me, it was my mom coming up to me at the end. Again, we're about to cry again. I'm just so emotional. But for me, it was her coming up to me, and you suck. For her coming up to me and giving me a hug and saying, "Baby, I see it. I support you. I love you," and saying those things that mothers say to their daughters just to comfort them. But it was a confirmation to me that everything is going to be okay. Like, you're going to be okay. And so, I mean, just the outpour from our ministry, our youth ministry, the children, the youth, and that really did something for me, just to hear their testimonies about how their lives have changed with just the little time that we had spent with them. And so thinking of, the next step that Jonathan and I were getting ready to take together, how many more lives could we impact? How many more lives can we pour into to say that you are worthy of, what God has to give you or what God has placed into your heart, and helping people to understand their purpose and live it, things like that. And I was just like blown away by the support of our church family and our friends just coming out during that time. It was a packed house. And so that just gave me, enough motivation, enough courage just to do what God actually told us to do.
So it wasn't exactly a packed house, but it was a whole lot of people there.
It was a whole lot of people.
It was a significant show of support. Mm-hmm. And definitely one that that we will never forget. And it was, again, last week we talked about Dr. Moreau's book, The Principles and Power of Vision, and about how, reading that book and finding the courage and the connection to scripture, to continue along the journey, like knowing and hearing that and believing that, all right, if God is calling us to do this, then it is our responsibility to be obedient, and it's his responsibility to provide. We really had to lean on that, because like while all of this prep and everything is going on, I'm building websites. I still maintain the current church website. One day we're gonna have somebody else build a website, but the initial website and blog that we had, I built, and Quentin and I and Anthony actually too did some writing for that. But I built the initial website, built the website that we have now as well. But doing that and just, I mean, like all of the behind the scenes admin functions and, you know, trying to get ready and making preparations to be able to get the church started. You know, got the PayPal set up and all that kind of stuff and all those things set up on the website and whatnot. And the way that people invested in the vision was, it was amazing, because, you know, say it all the time, like you can talk all day about what you believe and what you support and what's important to you. You can talk about it all day long, but time and money, not time or money, but time and money, is the one of the most significant indicators of what you believe. And it was so encouraging for people that were never going to directly and personally benefit from the ministry of Church on Purpose to be willing to invest their resources in the church before it ever got started. I mean, like we still living in Virginia and people are making contributions to the church then. And it is, I mean, like it is coming through right on time for us to be able to do everything that we need to be able to do in preparation for the move. But not only that, like the Lord is also, so like, you know, so people are making multiple contributions. They are giving to the church on one hand. Good evening, Sonia Hawkins. They're making contributions to the church on one hand, but then people are also giving to us directly. And when I tell you like how amazing God was, the resources for the church were everything that we needed to be able to take care of things for the church, you know, the registrations and the licenses and all that other kind of stuff, the website and everything that we needed there to be able to begin building a, you know, building and maintaining a presence online, and the filings and stuff that we had to do for the church. Like, you know, all of those resources were there. But then even for how people blessed us individually. And I don't want to get into like starting to call out names and stuff, but you know, because there were so many people that invested in us, but especially during our last 6 months in Virginia, Herman and Ruthenia Clark, and Phyllis and her husband, I mean, like they embrace us on a whole different level. And it was so amazing for them to just take the amount of time that we had left and for them to pour into us. And not only with time,
right,
but with money as well.
Yeah.
And when I say like so many times the Lord moved on their hearts and they responded in obedience and blessed us financially, they had no idea, but it was exactly when we needed it to be able to take care of things that we needed to be able to take care of. Because again, we were already strapped. I mean, it was tight. We literally didn't have 2 pennies to rub together and a pot to pee in.
They did have a pot.
Yeah, we did. But I mean, but the way that the Lord demonstrated to us so clearly during that time how he was going to provide. I mean, none of us want to deal with difficult times, but one of the things that the Lord made very clear during that time was that it is often in difficult times in life that we learn how to trust his faithfulness. Like if everything is always going great, if everything is always going well, if everything is always awesome and amazing, then it becomes very easy to just begin to rely on whatever our resources are and forget about our source. But when like you going through difficulty, when times are tough, and that's not just financially, but that's in all different kind of areas of life. When you are experiencing difficulty in life, that is the invitation to learn how to identify, trust, and depend on the faithfulness of God. And he used that moment of difficulty in our lives at that point to show us that he was committed to providing for what he called us to do. So much so that when we left Virginia on August 9th of 2015, we had eliminated all of our delinquent debt. And we had enough money to be able to pay for the moving expenses and well, actually, yeah, the moving expenses. So basically, well, hold on, before we get there, because we didn't end up moving until the second week of August. And so, you know, we agreed we were going to clean up and we were going to move out of our apartment by the end of July. And so I was literally, I think we stayed with your mom for that week and a half.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So you and the kids were already at the house, and I was literally at our apartment cleaning and moving stuff in the middle of the night for like an entire week by myself. And this is like dragging. So it was a 3-story house, super tall. Like every floor had 10-foot ceilings.
Every floor.
And we lived on the top 2 floors of the house. And so literally like bringing all of that stuff down, we had help periodically, but in the middle of the night, I'd be there by myself, like cleaning the apartment, taking all the stuff that we were going to end up throwing away, leaving it on the curb and all that kind of stuff. And the last night I was there, January 31st, I was there until 4:00 in the morning. Like I was out so late, Jene got scared because she was like, you ain't answering the phone and all this other, and I won't answer the phone because I was moving stuff and I was cleaning stuff and I was up and down the stairs and I was tired and it was the middle of the night and stuff. And but we were blessed because 2 of our friends, the parents of one of our godchildren, Nathan and Danielle, they allowed us to utilize their garage for the week and a half that we needed someplace to keep our stuff until we got the moving truck. And where we originally thought we were only going to be using a small portion of their garage, we actually ended up filling up their entire garage with our crap for a week and a half. So much so that they couldn't even get into their house. I tried to leave a path, but they couldn't even get into their house through their garage anymore, which was their primary entrance into the house. For a week and a half, they actually had to walk around to the front of the house and come in the front door. And
and we had taped off and everything in our house and in their garage.
Yeah, but that was like moving 101. We were going to try to go and get one of the little hitches and put it on the back of the truck. And so that was the original plan until we actually started moving stuff over and was like, that's not going to work. Like we're going to need a full-size truck to be able to make this move. And at that point, we just started cramming stuff into the garage. And it was literally like packed full, like that for a week and a half. So moving time came, picked up the budget truck, went back, and Sylvester Sumler, Fred Smith, Justin Bird, Jamal Brazil came and helped get the stuff out of the garage and packed into the moving truck. And I mean, just a tremendous blessing that day. We got loaded up and on August 8th and got ready to, to make that trip on August 9th. Got to spend some time hanging out with Quentin and one of our great friends, Chris Collins, on the night of the 8th. And we were up until like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, just talking before we got on the road. And finally went back and got like maybe like an hour or 2 of sleep, but really couldn't sleep that night because when we got ready to get on the road that morning, leaving from Chesapeake, I was driving the moving truck, and Jene had David and Jada in the truck with her, along with our friend, our goddaughter Serenity, and her mother Bethany. Were in the truck with Jene. And so when it came time to leave that morning, again, it was just kind of one of those like line in the sand kind of moments. And it's just like, all right, well, we finna go out here and plant this church, but the Lord is still challenging my faith. He's just like, all right, like you believed up until this point, which is great, but we still got a ways to go. And so, um, when we talk about like how the Lord provides for the journey, I mean, literally it is, um, I mean, it's a demonstration of why it's so important that we are obedient in the moments along the journey that seem insignificant. Mm-hmm. The reason that I say that is because like there was an overwhelming need to get the website up and to make it easy for people to be able to contribute to the work that we were doing. And so, before the church started, which was kind of weird because, we had a website and everything before we even had a ministry, like almost like a year and a half before we ever started ministry. But that day, the dots connect because when we were leaving Virginia, I'm in the moving truck and literally nobody else knows this at the time, but we've got a full tank of gas in the truck and we've got a full tank of gas in the Navigator, but nobody knows that we don't have any more money. Like we have exhausted our resources. We have enough money for a tank of gas for either vehicle. We've got a couple of bucks for like some food, but that is it. And they're like, all right, man, like, do I need to say something to somebody or like what's going on? But I just got this overwhelming sense that the Lord was like, and this is why it's very important that you learn how to be obedient to how the Spirit leads you. Because please understand, if you in my situation and in a similar situation to mine, and you try to do it the way that I did it, I can't guarantee you it's going to work out for you the way that it worked out for me, because that was a moment of obedience for me. If the Lord tell you to say something, say something. But in that moment, it was, getting ready to leave, it was like, man, these people have poured into us so much. Now we're moving to this place where these people aren't going to be, and we have to learn how to depend on the Lord. And so get in the truck, start the truck up, and it's just like, all right, Lord, we are leaving our home to go do what it is you called us to do. And if this is what you're calling us to, you're going to have to provide. And we pulled out of the parking lot and got on the road. And maybe like 15 minutes into the drive, like this song came on K-Love. No, matter of fact, when we were leaving the parking lot, this song came on K-Love. And to this day, I still don't remember what it was. But that song gave me the reassurance that the Lord heard me, that he knew, and that he was going to take care of us. It's part of the reason why when you get in the car with me, I'm always listening to K-Love or a K-Love type station, because of the blessing that it was. So we get on the road and we're driving, we done made it out of town and we're going up the road, and still like, all right, like, how much it's going to take to get there, and you still ain't got no money. So what you going to do? And it's just like, all right, Lord, well, you're going to have to provide. Even if that means that I got to stand outside of outside of the gas stations and I got to panhandle and ask people for money. Like, you're going to have to move on the hearts of the people that are going to see this black man standing there asking them for some money. You're going to have to move on their hearts and get them to give me enough money for us to be able to get gas, to be able to get to the next gas station. Like, I don't know how you're going to do it, but you're going to have to provide. And so we're driving down the road, 2 hours into the trip, I start getting notifications on my phone, and totally unprovoked, without having said anything about the need, without having expressed any kind of need to anybody. I mean, like, again, Jene driving in the truck behind me got no clue. Nobody knew. But the Lord, and I went back, because when I tell this story, I always said like the Lord laid it on somebody's heart. But I ended up going back and looking at the record in the PayPal, and it's just so awesome, because while we're on the road, my dad makes a contribution to our PayPal account, and the amount that the Holy Spirit told him to give us in that moment ended up being exactly what we needed to be able to cover our gas and our food for the rest of the trip, and to be able to get some groceries when we got into town. And when I saw that notification while we were driving down the road, I was like, we're going to be okay. And even though it hasn't been easy, there have been times where it's just like, I have no idea how we're going to be able to do this. No idea how we're going to be able to get through. I always go back to that moment. And I remember how the Lord provided for us when we trusted him. And I just continue to believe that he will continue to move on the hearts of his people to support the work that we're doing financially, so that we can do the things that the Lord has sent us here to do. We haven't always had the resources that we needed to be able to, that we thought we needed to be able to do things, but the Lord has always come through on time. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to get into the cliche right now. Oh, snap. This joint is getting ready to end. We got 2 minutes. But the Lord has always made sure we had what we needed to be able to do what we needed to do. Especially in those early days while we were still young, and, and we didn't really have a lot of stability as a church. He used a lot of people that weren't members of the church to financially support the ministry during that time, so that Jene and I wouldn't have to come out of pocket for everything. Just in an amazing way, moved on people's hearts. But we are definitely at a stage of transition as a ministry, as we have, we've grown in membership, and now we are trying to learn as a church how to be responsible for what the Lord has entrusted us with, and how to step up and to fill that role in that capacity that other people had covered for us while we were still learning and growing. And I'm excited about just what the Lord is going to be able to do when we get really good at investing in what God has charged us with. Mm-hmm. And then everything else that everybody else does being a supplement and an add-on on top of that to it, provide other opportunities and to enhance the work. But we're definitely at a transitional stage in ministry right now. And as we continue to grow, I know that there are going to be more moments like that first thing in the morning kind of experience. And I just know and believe that the Lord is going to provide. So we've got 30 seconds. So I'll let you wrap up, and then y'all can join us in reflection groups, sun.churchonpurpose.org.
Just know that this journey that God has taken us on has been very
15 seconds.
Has been very impactful. And hopefully you've gotten something out of us talking about our journey, because the journey was for a reason. And hopefully it blessed you this evening, tonight. So, yeah.
We love you. We will be back next week with some special guests to give you some additional insight into this journey, but pray you have a great night. Live each day on purpose. See you in reflection groups.